Every child needs time to explore his world in his own way. He stopped in the middle of the room. I say, Dibs, would you like to take off your hat and coat? I asked him after a while. That's right, he said. You take off your hat and coat, Dibs. You take off your hat, you take off your coat, Dibs. He made no motion to do anything about it. Then would you like to take off your coat and hat? I asked. All right, Dibs, go ahead and take them off. Take off mittens and boots too, he said. All right, I replied. Take off your mittens and your boots too, if you want to. That's right, he said, almost in a whisper. He stood there, plucking idly and restlessly at his coat sleeves. He began to whimper. He stood in front of me, hanging his head, whimpering. You would like to take them off, but you want me to help you? Is that it? I asked. That's right, he said. There was a sob in his voice as he replied. I sat down on a little chair and said, All right, Dibs, if you want me to help you to take off your coat and hat, come over here and I will help you. This, too, was done with a purpose in mind. I offered to help him, but sat down in such a location in the room that in order to get help, he would have to take a few steps of his own to it. He walked haltingly toward me. Boots too, he said huskily. All right, we'll take off the boots too, I said. And mittens, he said, holding out his hands. All right, and the mittens too, I replied. I helped him off with his mittens, hat, coat, boots. I put the mittens in his coat pocket, handed him his coat and hat. He dropped them on the floor. I picked them up and hung them on the doorknob. Let's put them here until it is time to go, I said. We have an hour to spend together in this room. Then it will be time for you to go home again. He did not reply. He walked over to the easel and looked at the paints. He stood there for a long time. Then he named the colors on the easel. Slowly he rearranged them. He placed the red, yellow, and blue on the shelf of the easel. Carefully, he moved them apart and in the appropriate spaces added other colors to give the 6 full strength colors of the spectrum. Then he set the tertiary colors in the correct places, added black and white, and had on the edge of the easel the full color and color value scale. He did this silently, slowly, carefully. When he had them all lined up in order, he picked up one of the jars and examined it. He looked into the jar, stirred the paint with the brush in the jar, held it up to the light, ran his fingers lightly over the label. Favor rule paints, he said. Red, favor rule paints. Yellow, favor rule paints. Blue, favor rule paints. Black. This was a partial answer to one question. He was obviously reading the labels. They were indeed favor rule paints, and the colors were correctly arranged and named. Well, I said, So you can read the labels on the paint jars, and you know all the names of the colors. That's right, he said haltingly. Then he sat down at the table and reached for the box of crayons. He read the name on the box. Then he took out the red crayon and printed in neat block letters R-E-D. He did the same with all other colors and used them in the same ordered, full-colored sequence in a circle. As he printed them out, he spelled them, naming each letter as he printed it. I watched him. I tried to respond verbally to him in recognition of his attempt to communicate with me in this activity. You are going to spell out names of each color and print it in that color? Is that correct? I say. R-E-D spells red, doesn't it? That's right, he said, slowly, haltingly. And you're making a color wheel, aren't you? That's right, he muttered. He picked up the box of watercolors. He read the trade name on the box. He dabbed blotches of color on a piece of drawing paper in the same deliberate, rigid sequence. I attempted to keep my comments in line with his activity, trying not to say anything that would indicate any desire on my part that he do any particular thing, but rather to communicate understandingly and simply recognition in line with his frame of reference. I wanted him to lead the way. I would follow. I wanted to let him know from the beginning that he would set pace in that room, and I would recognize his efforts at two-way communication with some concrete reality basis of a shared experience between the two of us. I didn't want to go overboard and exclaim about his ability to do all these things. Obviously, he could do these things. When the initiative is left up to the individual, he will select the ground upon which he feels his greatest security. Any exclamation of surprise or praise might be interpreted by him as the direction he must take. It might close off any other area of exploration that might be far more important for him. All people proceed with a caution that will protect the integrity of their personality. We were getting acquainted. These things Dib mentioned, objects in this room that were not involved with any serious affect, were the only shared ingredients at this point for communication between us. To Dibs, these were safe concepts. Occasionally, he would glance at me, but when our eyes met, he would immediately look away. Certainly, his beginning activities were a revelation. Hedda had good reason for her faith in Dibs. He was, indeed, not only on the verge of coming through, but actually emerging. Whatever his problems were, we could discard the label of mental retardation.